So, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second virtual Indigenous business meet and greet. It's a pleasure for me to co-host, moderate this with Bruce Williams, CEO of the Chamber of Commerce, and we're grateful for the partnership with the Chamber. My name is Ian Robertson. I'm the CEO of the Greater Victoria Harbour Authority. And over the next hour or so, we're going to talk about Indigenous Business Directory. We'll speak to three Indigenous businesses. We'll talk a little bit about the local Indigenous economy. Of course, we'll talk about recovery plans post COVID, whenever we're out of this. Hopefully, we're getting near the end and we'll see what that looks like. And then, of course, we'll also talk about Indigenous reconciliation and the work that these businesses are doing. Before I begin, I'd like to just start off and acknowledge that we're gathered on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen people, specifically the Esquimalt Nation and Songhees Nation, whose relationship to the land and harbor continue to this day. And as an organization, GVHA, we're very proud that both the Esquimalt Nation, Songhees Nation, are on our board of directors and have been since our organization was conceived back in 2002. Um, Within our DNA, you could say we have a strong commitment to First Nations, and in fact, we have a First Nations principle that's embedded within our Constitution, and that is to commit to working in partnership with the Esquimalt Nation and Songhees Nation as they pursue their cultural and economic aspirations in the harbor. We're here today to talk about the GVHA's Indigenous Business Directory that's now got 40 plus businesses, and the connection that we have with the Canadian Council of Aboriginal Business. And the CCAB has called on the federal government, provincial government to set targets of 5% of procurement. That matches the percent of population in Canada who is Indigenous. So we're proud as an organization to be working towards this goal. And while COVID has had a real impact upon our organization, as it has on many, we're proud of the fact that in 2021, 2% of our organization, or should I say, operational spend, was towards supporting Indigenous businesses. And in a 2-year period between 2018 2021, over 16% of our capital spend was dedicated towards Indigenous businesses. So before I begin, I just thought I'd toss it over to my co-host, Bruce Williams. And Bruce, a couple of comments from you before we meet the three Indigenous businesses.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's great to be here, Ian. Thank you for the invitation. I too would like to acknowledge that I live and work in the ancestral lands of the Lekwungen-speaking Coast Salish nations, the Songhees and the Esquimalt. Very proud to live and work side by side with them every single day. So Indigenous business support is a priority for the Chamber. We have a number of policy and advocacy priorities, which include that, because we understand the potential and, of course, the need for that to happen. I've had some fairly substantial dealings with all of these regional nations in my previous position, when I was the interim CEO at the South Island Prosperity Partnership and got to know many of the nations and the people. And to be honest with you, from that, I gathered a stronger understanding that I have ever had before of not only the culture, but the business side of what the nations and Indigenous business operators do around here. I'm a great admirer of the ethics and the quality and the priorities within those business models. At the Chamber, of course, along with Indigenous business support, we're looking at things like affordable housing and daycare that apply to everybody, to enable our workforce to be as robust as possible and have everyone have access to those resources. Agriculture and food is becoming a priority for us, of course, because we realize that we don't have the sustainability that we could and should have with our food supply. And we're very much hoping that we're going to be able to work with Indigenous businesses in the nations on that. Healthcare is a big concern for all of us, of course, and the recovery of tourism, which will involve the Indigenous sector too, with the plans that are currently in place to get a number of operations up and running. So I'm just going to leave it at that right now. Self-directed economic growth is what it's all about with Indigenous-owned companies and with the nations themselves. So the Chamber is always here to support that, and I look forward to our conversations here today. And thanks again for the chance to be here.
All right, thanks, Bruce. For those of you that are online and listening and participating, if you've got any questions, please use the Q&A function. And as we go through and speak to these Indigenous businesses, we'll certainly find an opportunity to ask some of the questions. So why don't we get rolling? And it's a privilege for me to introduce Corey and Mike from Gwai Engineering. A little bit about both of these guys. Corey is a member of the Old Masset Village Band, which forms part of the Haida Nation. Corey has got his master's in engineering. He's been working with clients on Vancouver Island since 2008 on civil and environmental engineering. In 2017, Corey founded GVHA Engineering, an Indigenous-owned business that provides an extensive range of engineering consulting services with a focus on the First Nations on Vancouver Island. Mike Acton is Principal Managing Director, founding member of GVHA as well. He is a registered professional civil engineer, certified contract administrator, and a project management professional with over 30 years of experience. So Corey and Mike, welcome. Maybe I'll start off and just throw it out to either of you to answer this. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about GVHA Engineering, what you do and the types of services that you provide.
Sure. Thanks, Ian. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for the introduction. Just to kind of expand on that, yeah, I'm from Old Masset originally. Grew up there, moved down to Souk, went through my formal engineering training here. Met Mike probably about 11 or 12 years ago. Hard to believe it's been 4 years since we started GVHA, but we started with the three of us in March 2017. Did a head count recently. I think we're probably up to about 15 or 16 of us now. And really spent the first couple of years sort of just developing our business models, getting to know nations, kind of traveling around, just shaking a lot of hands and building those relationships. And then really in the last couple of years is where we started to kind of take off with the work that we do. So we're working for nations all over the province. Obviously, we're well established here in South Vancouver Island, sort of working all over the island. We got good relationships over in the Lower Mainland, working for nations on the Sunshine Coast, in the interior, back home in Haida Gwaii, North Coast. So we've expanded quite well the last year or two. As far as our services, we offer a wide range of engineering services. So Mike and I are on the civil engineering side. We typically do a lot of land development, infrastructure work, basically anything to do with site development process from feasibility all the way up to commissioning a site. And then the other half of our business, we have a full qualified environmental team. So they deal with site remediation, investigation work, working with contractors, working with developers or nations, and kind of assessing their site needs and remediating, which often kind of segues sort of naturally into the civil side of things. So those are our two core areas of business, but over the last couple of years, just kind of by virtue of the type of work that we do, we've gone in a lot of different directions that we're excited about. So we start getting into some clean energy projects and renewable energy stuff. Obviously, that's a huge demand for a lot of nations on the West Coast, and especially home in Haida Gwaii. So that's something we're passionate about, and we're still learning. We're starting to get into those areas. We do a lot of engagement work and working with communities and sort of providing that softer approach, that kind of skill set that complements development projects. So we're pretty diverse in our skill sets. We're starting to build a pretty experienced and skilled team. So yeah, I mean, the next couple of years, I think we're just going to try to build on that. We're looking at expansions into the Lower Mainland, perhaps a satellite office over there, maybe a satellite office in the Okanagan. Mike, I don't know if you have anything to expand on that.
No, I just have a little bit. I thought that was a great kind of intro and background on the services we provide. And I think you alluded to the exciting part of our business is the opportunities that we're being provided. And it's not only in the engineering sector, it's partnerships that we've got now with CRD and with WSANIC Leadership Group, and getting us involved in contracting and environmental remediation, and just enabling us to build capacity in local communities, especially on the peninsula right now. And we're hoping to take those models and move those into other areas like the Lower Mainland, where we're already established. So and allowing us to employ and build capacity, not only in consulting, but in contracting and labor, and involving the youth and the nations that we're partnering with. There's lots of exciting opportunities that Corey and our teams have been provided, not only kind of at a provincial, but on a local government level, which is really exciting. So we're trying to be a good partner and ensure that we're positioned in a competitive way so that we can make those partnerships work and employ and build capacity with the nations that we're partnered with. So it's a really, really exciting time, especially for me, who spent 35 years scratching out trying to get a wind proposal against 15 to 20 competitive engineering firms in Victoria. It's kind of a breath of fresh air to work for nations that want to work with us solely and appreciate what we provide and what we do for their nation. So it's for me especially, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and thanks, Meg. Sorry, one thing I forgot to mention too, Bruce, I think we put a little presentation in the notes where I'm not sure where it is on the platform here, but it just gives you a little bit more information on our team and some of the projects we've been involved with lately and some of our services.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Brian put that in the chat.
Oh, Brian, sorry.
Yeah, so that's there for everybody to take a look at.
Yeah.
Corey and Mike, you and I first met at the Advanced Business Match event a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago now, which was something that's put together. It's always sort of described as speed dating for business, but it's where Indigenous and non-Indigenous businesses can get together and talk about what each other does. So when you're talking about working with nations, I mean, you're open for business with pretty much anybody at all. Locally here on the peninsula, Mike, as you mentioned, you're working with the Sayout Nation, who had a pretty catastrophic fire back in 2009, and you're working with them right now to rebuild their big house. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Corey, jump in wherever you feel necessary or interested. We got brought in early on the funding part of the big house, and we were instrumental in assisting the nation to acquire funds to get that project rolling. And it's really a community effort. We're part of working with the nation and building capacity for their access road, for new infrastructure, getting into the site, doing all the site servicing and site development, all the stormwater management and design of what that involves with respect to the entire site, because it's a fairly large and significant piece of property that the big house is being located on. And it's all native driven. All the companies that are on site are Aboriginal owned, and it's a exciting project to be a part of. And we've been doing kind of a media, almost a weekly, if not more frequent, updates with respect to that project on a lot of our media platforms. So it's been fun to see the reaction throughout the community with the updates and the postings that we've been putting on the media platforms. And yeah, it's just a great story and something that we're lucky to be part of.
Yeah, and just to go beyond that too, I mean, our relationship with Sayout and Sartlip sort of evolved into a professional relationship with SANEC, and over the last year, we've sort of been privileged to start a new company partnered with SANEC. So we actually started a new contracting company, Quentis Transportation, and we recently signed an MOU with CRD to haul biosolids waste within the region. So that's an exciting project for all three nations on the peninsula. We're just starting that since January, so it's a 5-year commitment on behalf of the CRD, and we're kind of just getting our feet wet, but we're excited for the opportunities to keep working with these nations.
Well, that sounds like an exciting project. Sorry,
Yeah.
Bruce, did you have a follow-up on that?
I was just going to sort of make mention of something that I referred to in my opening remarks, and you guys both talked about the environmental work that you're doing. A lot of people, I think, could stand to learn more about the ethics behind what Aboriginal business stands for. Appreciation of the planet. You know, I mean, before colonization, we didn't have a lot of the problems we have right now, but you guys and others in your line of work are doing things that are trying to repair the planet, to bring it back to where it was before. and you do it in an ethical manner that's good for future generations. So that's kind of built right into the DNA of everything you do, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, especially as engineers too, I mean, we're stewards of the environment, right? So when we approach a development project, particularly with First Nations, I mean, sustainability is often at the top of the list. So it's not just looking at efficiency, it's kind of an overall model for their development that makes sense for their community. And that's the approach we take with all projects with nations, that engagement piece at the very beginning, kind of getting that buy-in from the community and their groups as a whole. So everybody has that input and what's important to them in the project and how we can approach it as professionals and let that guide us. I mean, that's kind of how Mike and I have been doing our work at GVHA here since we started.
Yeah, it's a different vision and different methodology than what we would typically roll out as an engineering company on a non-Indigenous project. We try to recommend and we put forward designs and try and steer the clients in the right direction with our ideas. Whereas with Indigenous projects, we sit down and collaborate and work with the communities and use their ideas and try and formulate the best solutions to what they want to see. And on the sustainability and just being stewards, it does give us a big opportunity, more so than on other projects, because we build in that capacity, we build in that environmental sustainability into the proposals, and it allows us to do different things. For instance, we've got one project where we're revegetating riparian areas that have been historically denuded by the public unknowingly, because that sensitive area kind of within 15 meters of a wetland or riparian area. Most of us actually, we want to walk through there, and because we want to be close to the water and experience that kind of cool sensation. Whereas we want to protect those areas and put split rail fences at that 15-meter offset so that the ecosystem can regrow and revegetate. So we're involved in restoration projects like that. We're involved in replanting of forests to make them healthier, because all forests are dying and there's a lot of root rot on Vancouver Island and a lot of wind throw with our development, and being able to reforest and make those environments healthy again. We don't get that opportunity on a lot of other projects. So to be able to do that, it's exciting on our environmental side for sure.
Yeah, Mike, that, just listening to what you're saying, it kind of builds on my next question for both of you. The last 14 months has been just devastating for a lot of small businesses. But I'm wondering, just listening to you, Mike or Corey, is there one particular project that you've worked on or that you're working on that's been really exciting for you? That's really, I mean, I'm sure they're all exciting, but is there one project that really sticks out in your mind as being a real highlight for you?
Yeah, I got one, Mike. And I mean, I'll be bragging a little bit here, but I started working with my home community in the last 6 months up in Old Masset. Actually, their clean energy director is a cousin of mine. So they, with the Council of the Haida Nation and Skinny-Bound Council Old Masset, they've developed a steering committee for clean energy projects up there, just because they're so reliant on diesel and Haida Gwaii. I think they're probably at the top of the list as far as hydro costs and the amount of diesel that they burn. So they've looked at a number of clean energy projects that they're ambitious towards. So we started helping them 6 months ago in Old Masset. They have a district energy project that they're looking to install boilers to heat the local hospital up there. So I've been working on grant applications with my cousin, and over the last 2 months, we've secured over $750,000, which is 2/3 of the project costs right now. We got 3 or 4 other grants that are kind of on the go right now. So we're kind of crossing our fingers that we can get up to that 90%, and then the project's kind of a no-brainer, and it's going to allow them to establish it and kind of build out. And it's going to allow further development of their sites, their band offices and everything. So it's an exciting first step for me to sort of kind of be involved up there and kind of just seeing the response from my family and social media and stuff has kind of been motivating for me.
That's great. Mike, how about you? Anything that sticks out in your mind?
Well, I can think of a lot of projects, but probably the toughest one, the most challenging one is reinventing myself and reintroducing myself back at home with my 2 teenagers and my wife. I don't think they've seen me as much in the last 18 months and that they probably seen me in the last 35 years. No, probably I would have to say the Malahat Nation. I've had an opportunity to work with them on a feasibility study for a new treatment plant, which is in dire need because their septic systems for their community are very primitive and failing. So to be able to be part of that project and kind of correct something that's been a difficult point for them, it's kind of slowed down development and economic activity in that area for the nation. And they've got lots of beautiful land and lots of opportunities. So to be able to be part of that at the beginning stages and hopefully over the next 3 or 4 years, we can see it come to fruition. And in addition, we have another project with the nation there that involves a marina and a boat launch for their community. So it's all part of their master plan. And it's just, it's fun to be part of and see that their vision. They've got a really motivated staff and team at Malahat Nation. And it's exciting to be part of that vision. And I can hopefully be around to see some of this get built and just be able to make that difference in the community to provide a basic rudimentary need like sewage treatment and then provide that economic activity in their commercial core with that boat launch and future marina.
Well, that's great, guys. Yeah, thank you, Corey. Thank you, Mike. It's really fascinating to learn more about GVHA. And I think, Bruce, over to you to talk to our next business.
Yeah, thank you. Malahat Nation, though, like you say, has got a ton going on. The Skywalk is going to open soon. Talking about a film studio, tons going on up there. Anyway, next up here, my privilege to introduce Catherine Davies. Catherine is the sales and events manager for Songhees Events and Catering, which is one of several businesses owned by Songhees Nation. It's a part of the Songhees Economic Development Corporation. If you've ever been to the Songhees Wellness Center, that magnificent building, the food that you had there came from Catherine's department. Songhees Events and Catering offers conference and meeting spaces with full service catering on-site and off-site. The Gallery Cafe is on-site. The Songhees food truck is now permanently located next to the cannabis store that the nation opened up. How's that for a good business plan? Snacks and cannabis at the same place. Good on you. Your catering team is 80% Indigenous with a focus on mentorship and teaching for Indigenous youth. Yeah. So Catherine, your staff is very engaged and the young people get really interested in what you offer them to do and teach them to do. Tell me about that dynamic.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that we had over a couple of years, we had a culinary program for in partnership with Camosun College, the Aboriginal Culinary Arts or Culinary Tourism and Hospitality Program, where we had students coming in and getting their PC1, as well as opportunity to learn things in the tourism sector and event management sector. So that was very exciting for us to see these young Indigenous students learn about hospitality. Some of them came onto the team full time afterwards. Just kind of gives opportunity to learn a new skill and get out there and be confident to go out to other places and show what they have to offer.
Great, thanks.
So Catherine, I can't recall an event, going back to 2019, I can't recall an event, business event, any kind of an event in the Greater Victoria area that didn't involve, the Songhees Events and Catering, and you were so busy and things were booming, and how have you reacted, or how's it been just in the last year with COVID, and how are you kind of managing and kind of getting your way through to when we can have events again?
Well, absolutely. Actually, 2020 was poised to be our best year. We had all kinds of events on the books for offsite catering as well as for big conferences within the center. So it kind of took us aback to start with. We went from having a staff of up to 50 people when we were doing our maximum capacity down to the core management team, and kind of trying to pivot the food truck at the Greater Victoria in conjunction with the Greater Victoria Harbour Authority down at Ship Point, trying to get sort of the interest of the local people to come to see what we have to offer. Farmers markets became a huge part of what we do, which will continue. But it's sort of, you had to focus on different things that are not what we would normally do. With the center being shut down, it still continues to be shut down. We're just trying to find different ways to get out there and be relevant still. So it was a tough go, but I think right now we're kind of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah. We started delivering socially distanced catering menus off to Zoom meetings. So we're driving stuff all over the town for people to have their meeting so they can share that food that they would be if they were in the conference center or at another center having their meeting. So just always focusing and looking for the new thing that we can do to keep out there.
So as you look ahead to, I mean, I think as we all hopefully look ahead to 2022 and perhaps opportunities and things opening up, are you beginning to book or looking at bookings into 2022?
No.
Or are you still waiting to see where the health orders go?
We're still waiting to see. What I like to say to people, I can save dates, but not only are we looking at what the health authority says, but the Songhees Nation has to be comfortable with opening up the center to public. So I'm cautiously optimistic that we'll start booking smaller engagements. I think it may take a little longer for the larger events to come back into the center. So we'll focus on delivering what we can as soon as we can, and getting the team back ready to do all that. So going from 30 to 50 people at max to 4 people now, we're bringing people back with the food truck and the farmers markets. We're hoping to have another smaller food truck trailer or food trailer at the Inner Harbor this summer. So kind of exciting opportunities with that. Actually, it's kind of neat to pivot and see what you can do when you're not doing what you normally do.
Yeah, so the new truck that you mentioned there, it's pretty clear that Songhees Nation is very good at business and doing what they do. Mm-hmm. And with their Economic Development Corporation that Christina Clark runs, who you know very well.
Yes, I do.
Because she's your sister.
Yes.
But yeah, getting a new truck is one thing. Just tell me about the expansion of the business. I have a feeling you're going to continue to grow. So just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, an expansion. I mean, as well as bringing in the different new things like markets and expanding. But we're working. I work quite a bit with the tourism aspect of things with Explore Songhees. So we're kind of combining what will be happening with the new tourism, the marine trail, what we'll do with culinary to fit those together to showcase culture and history for Songhees Nation. So one of the things we're kind of looking at is how do we elevate Indigenous cuisine to make it just to make it a little bit more palatable and more interesting, or not, I shouldn't say more interesting because it's very interesting, but something that people are going to be going, wow, this is incredible. I never thought about this kind of thing combined with that. And so that's exciting. And that what we'll be doing is working with Songhees Nation members who are cooks who are interested in that, and maybe the skill set of Chef Dave Roger and the team, and looking at different foods and then how that works and how you put that and present it for receptions and for different culinary food tours and that. So.
Can you just talk a little bit more about that food? I mean, we all know bannock and we know salmon as being sort of staples, but tell me about some of the other food items you're talking about.
Well, I mean, I think people would kind of step outside of the box and think about like herring, because Songhees is like, it's a nation of herring. So maybe how do we look at about making that something that is palatable, herring roe eggs and that. So the Indigenous is something we're kind of looking at, stinging nettle, bringing things that we can do that are different. The camas, of course, you have to make sure that you're able to harvest it and not overuse it and utilize it. But we have our rooftop garden, which we bring Indigenous plants into, and we use those to harvest to herbs and different things to add to our culinary repertoire. And then just getting Indigenous youth and community to let us know what they want us to present and our team to work on.
Sounds very delicious, quite honestly. So, Catherine, thank you for that. Ian, I'll throw it back over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Catherine, maybe just one last question. Is there something specifically about Songhees events and catering that you would want people to know that maybe they don't know?
Well, as you say, we are an Indigenous company that is primarily looking to employ Indigenous people, Lekwungen people, starting with Songhees Nation, Esquimalt Nation, but also we're very open to working with the community, the other community nations that are around. So our team is very diversified. We have people from some Songhees, Esquimalt. We have people who work with us from Pakwachin, Sayout, Sartlip, into the interior nations on the mainland. So we're very diversified and just everybody who loves to share and talk about a little bit about themselves, not just be delivering food, but kind of be delivering their culture and openness. Welcome. Songhees Catering is a welcoming, kind of open company. Sorry, I'm nervous.
No,
You're doing great.
yeah, no, it's great. No, I've had the opportunity, personal, to when the food truck was down at Ship Point, I had the opportunity. It was just a couple of blocks away from the office, so I'd come down, and the food is just outstanding. And I've been, as a lot of us have had the opportunity to be on at the Songhees Wellness Center and some of the events, and the food has just been outstanding. It's really, really good. So, continued good success to you and the team, and as we kind of get through this particular period.
I think people are going to be wanting to get out there, explore food, gather together. So it's the opportunity, once it opens up, we will be booming again, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, we'll remind people that the truck actually is now permanently located on Admirals Road. If you know where the big Canadian Tire is, and there's a Rexall across the street, it's directly across from that. Or just follow the crowds going to the cannabis store, and you'll find the the food truck.
Right now, we're operating Tuesday to Saturday from 10 till 4, and looking to expand on those hours as we get our team back to full capacity. It's exciting.
Great, thanks.
That's great. Yeah, thanks, Catherine.
Thank you.
Right. Next, it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Linda Lucas with the Indigenous Perspective Society, and a little bit about Linda. Linda's from the Heshquiet First Nations on the west coast of Vancouver Island. Linda has a master's of social work from the University of Victoria. She's got over 25 years of experience in the field of Indigenous child welfare, including policy development, organizational development, best practices in governance. Linda's job title is Special Projects Coordinator, which has included everything from curriculum development, oversight, managing the Aboriginal Social Worker Training Program, which is an 8-week program delivered under the contract for the Ministry of Children and Family Development. Indigenous Perspective Society has a provincial mandate with a mission to provide culturally relevant training, research, and policy that advances and strengthens the lives of Indigenous peoples. Linda, it's great to see you. Thank you for joining us. And before I begin, just to throw it out to everyone who's online with us, that if you've got any questions, just to use the Q&A function, and we'll make sure that we have some opportunity to ask any three of our businesses some of those questions. So, Linda, can you tell us a little bit more about the Indigenous Perspective Society, what you do, and how the organization came to be? I think you're on mute there, Linda.
I always forget about that mute function on Zoom. Well, thank you for having me here today. It's an honor to be here and it's really interesting to hear what other groups are doing, in the in the Greater Victoria area around business development and different business models. So yeah, Indigenous Perspective Society, formerly known as Caring for First Nations Children Society, has been in existence as a nonprofit since 1994. Prior to that, it was really started as a grassroots movement. You know, it came from the communities all across BC because of the concerns around child welfare. Aboriginal children being apprehended and taken out of their communities and really disconnected from their families, their nations, their identity, etc. So about 7 or 8 people got together and started saying, we need something, we need an organization that's going to support us in the communities, in the training that we need. So starting in the early 80s, late 80s, up until even recently, you know, the push for communities to take back the responsibility for child welfare. And so how Caring for First Nations Children Society supported those communities to take responsibility for child welfare was through training. And we actually went through a major rebranding process about 5 or 6 years ago to change our name to a new logo, a new direction, expanded mandate. And so we became the Indigenous Perspective Society. Previously, the name, a lot of people thought we were a daycare, Caring for First Nations Children Society. So it really was timely, you know, in terms of the work that we were doing to support Indigenous child welfare to go through a rebrand and to become more independent, I think, of government funding, because we were 100% reliant on government funding previously. And so with the rebranding process, it gave us like a fresh start, if you will. And with about 2015, with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, you know, there was opportunities there to sort of expand our suite of trainings into different areas. I just want to make sure I caught some of my notes here. So with that, yeah, Indigenous Perspective Society, you know, as I noted, was 100% funded by and reliant on government funding. And that places nonprofits in a really precarious situation when you're reliant on 100% reliant on government funding, especially as some of you might know, you know, when the wind changes and there's a new direction, funding can get cut, which happened to us. So it provided that opportunity for us to really think about how we could embrace social enterprising, which is the buzzword in the nonprofit community, for really becoming more business-like and expanding our suite of trainings and our mandate. Did that cover that, Ian?
Yeah, it does. You know, I've got a few more questions, but maybe I'll just turn it over to Bruce, and then we'll keep kind of learning more about the organization.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, am I on mute?
There, you're good.
No, I'm not. Good. Okay. Always good to check before you start talking. We're starting to learn all that stuff right now. You know, training around understanding more about equity and diversity and inclusion, cultural training around, you know, understanding more of Indigenous culture. In the nightmare that we lived through in the United States over the last 4 years, we saw that very often people's opinions are based on ignorance. They don't understand, they don't have tolerance based on what they don't know and what they think to be true. Are you seeing more of an evidence of people wanting to learn more about inclusion and equity and that sort of thing, either based on how we saw that people can be very ugly when they want to be, but has there been an increased outreach about that sort of training?
Well, I think that's a very good question, you know, considering what you've mentioned, you know, how the world is changing, especially with what's happening in the States and in Canada. You know, there's lots of issues around Indigenous people coming to the forefront, and, you know, police shootings and wellness checks. You know, we're hearing a lot of those, you know, really unfortunate circumstances. But I would suggest that since 2015, 2015, when the Truth and Reconciliation put out their the calls to action, the 94 recommendations, there has been more interest, I would say, in understanding what some of the issues are from an Indigenous perspective. And I think from, looking at what the Indigenous Perspective Society has provided in terms of training around cultural perspectives, I think there's more of a willingness for people willingness and interest, I think, to learn more about the history, how that continues to impact Indigenous people today. And as Corey and Mike indicated, they talked about some of those infrastructure things that are in Indigenous communities that aren't working anymore, like what's the history behind that? How did that come to be, And I think for for people who have attended the training, the light bulb kind of goes off. It's like, oh, I didn't know about the history of residential school. I didn't know about the history of the reserve community, how it came to be through the Indian Act. And that because the Indigenous people were really separated, kept isolated, not given opportunities for those economic development opportunities, So I think once people have gone through some of that training, the momentum has continued in different ways. I know people who were volunteering in Indigenous communities, such as out in Sayout at the Elders luncheon, or supporting some of those grassroots community initiatives. So I think, yes, there's a shift, and there's always more that can be done.
Yeah, if I can just do a quick follow-up on that too, the understanding that nations bring to our, which I referred to before, our understanding of our relationship with the planet, for example.
Mm-hmm.
All of the environmentalists who are doing what they do and say what they say could learn so much from Indigenous culture about how to heal the planet and bring it back.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And, we're sort of, it feels like we're at this crux of needing to make a major shift there in terms of the environment and the work that Corey and Mike are doing. And so I really, raise my hands up to the people on the call today when forward thinking, about what needs to change in our communities.
So Linda, our board, my board, the Greater Victoria Harbour Authority, we've got some training planned with you around Indigenous cultural training and learning in June. And I know that talking to our chair and our other board members, they're really, really looking forward to that session. So
Yeah.
they're looking forward to that. But for those that are listening and want to learn more, what type of corporate or organizational training programs do you offer? And if let's just say an organization's not had any Indigenous cultural training, how would you recommend they start? And how do they, how would you recommend they start the process to learn more?
Well, I've been myself approached by different organizations, nonprofits, and the business broader sector as well, religious groups, and I think it really, just to start in that, it's about the conversation. What is it you know? What is it you don't know? What is it you want to know? Because I think there's a lot of misconceptions out there, around Indigenous people. And, as an example, several years ago, we did a really, it was the Anglican Church in the Peninsula that really made an effort to develop those relationships with the Saanich communities. And, they brought one of the churches brought their congregation together for a day sort of reckoning, and reconciliation. and through, I think conversations both with individuals and small groups and a broader sort of panel conversation, that was just kind of taking the baby steps, to move forward with making some of those, the dynamic changes that I see that particular group make, really putting legs to making change in the relationship with the local community, and I think the broader community on the island.
If I may, you made reference to the Indian Act, which is something that a lot of us should know more about. As I mentioned, when I was with SIP, I learned a little bit about that. There's a book I keep meaning to buy that is called 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act, Helping Canadians Make Reconciliation with Indigenous Peoples a Reality. It's written by a guy named Bob Joseph. And the book is about $20. Have you read that by any chance? You could probably write it. Yeah, but it would be a pretty educational and interesting read for all of us, I would think. Do you agree?
I would agree. It really brings to the fore the misconceptions people have, and brings a more truthful paradigm dialogue to the discussion. I mean, the Indian Act is the most antiquated piece of legislation there is in the history of Canada, and it's still in effect today, and it was the most racist piece of legislation, and it really has control over everything that Indigenous people do within their communities, health, economics, education, social development, all of those kind of determinants, of health are really impacted by the policies and the legislation that have controlled communities for so many years, and I heard Gwen Phillips speaking, she's from the Ktunaxa Nation in the corner of BC there, about colonization and how colonization impacts the health of all Indigenous people, and so really trying to make efforts in her community to address all of those systemic barriers that continue to impact the children, families, and communities. So, thanks for the question. I think it's a really important question. And I know through some of the training Indigenous Society provides, that topic is covered, quite looking at it from a barrier perspective, right? So I appreciate
Canadians,
yeah.
Canadians would be appalled to know what's in the Indian Act if you don't already. And it would also give everyone a little different insight into why the statue of John A. Macdonald was removed from in front of City Hall in Victoria. There's a very good reason for that. And the Indian Act is a big part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate your questions around that. It's important to acknowledge that piece of legislation.
So Linda, we've got someone from Vic PD, and Jason has asked the question if you've got any, if you've designed any historical and cultural training for police. Have you done anything with any of the police agencies?
Yep, Indigenous Perspective Society has provided training, and I think it's okay to say the Saanich Police, about 5 or 6 years ago, we provided, I think it was about 10 sessions to, I think there was about, God, there must have been well over 100 police who attended. It was just a short 2-hour session, enough for the, as an organization. I think they've adopted some things that strengthen their relationship with the broader community in Victoria. I know there was conversations around, how do you approach, like the Victoria Native Friendship Center as an example, because there was a gap there in the relationship, right? And the Victoria Native Center provides services to a large urban population in Victoria. And so it's really just about picking up, the phone and saying, Who can I speak to? Can I speak to Ron Rice, the executive director, and just have a conversation, right?
Yeah.
You know, so yes, Indigenous Perspective Society did provide training to the Sanish Police Department. The other piece that the society provides is called GLADU training, and that's for police, it's for probation officers, people involved in the court system. You know, and GLADU is a legal principle that says Indigenous people have to be, if they're involved in those court systems, you have to recognize and recognize the history of what got them there. So really taking a look at that, the lens of a more holistic approach to understanding the person and what brought them into that court system. So yeah, we definitely have provided that training, and I see Jason has responded.
Yeah.
Great. I can give contact information for who to contact.
That's great. You know, if there's one thing we've gained out of this, it's a connection, and it's a bit more understanding. So, Jason, thanks for that question.
I'm going to
Yeah,
ask
Chris.
if I could, Ian. Yeah, I just wanted, this is a question for everybody, and it's something that I ask quite often in group meetings with people now. And it's just a broad statement. What has changed about the way you do your business throughout this COVID period, and how much of that will remain in place? The changes and the pivots that you've made. Anybody who wants to jump in? Catherine, what are you going to keep doing the same way?
Well, I think looking at different streams of business that are outside of where we normally do things, and those things will not go away. You know, we thought, oh, farmers markets are just going to be for this summer. You know, no, they're now part of our business that we do. So like expanding different business markets, and then just keeping those rather than saying, oh, it's over, so we can go back to what is our wheelhouse. No, but let's just keep it going, keep it rolling.
Yeah. Takeout and delivery is here to stay.
Yes. Yeah.
Corey and Mike, anything you guys have had to, I'll use the word pivot, to do that you're going to keep doing in the same way?
Oh, I mean, I've got used to working from home for the last year now. I mean, I went from working in the office 8 till 6 every day to waking up and going to my basement and eating lunch in my own house. So I think I'm accustomed to that lifestyle now. I mean, like I said, today is kind of the first day I'm back in the office in months. It was really just getting used to that for us. We have staff, we're kind of working all over the place right now, working from their homes. We've set up sort of a COVID-friendly office space here for people who are comfortable coming into the office to at least have a home base here. But first probably 2 or 3 months was a little challenging as far as effective communication and everything. But I think we've kind of learned over the last year with Zoom and all these other platforms, just how we can have our team effectively spread out and still get our work done.
And I think moving forward, we will have systems in place that if we do want to continue to have people working from home, I think we can. It's just a matter of, for us in our business, it's a lot of interacting. So ensuring that the right people are in the office the right amount of time to get the proper mentorship and team building, because a lot of our work you can't do in isolation. So understanding how we build our teams and who's home and who's not home and who's at the office at the same time it's not just about COVID, it's about making sure that we match up the right people. So it's definitely been a learning curve for us, but I think we're at the point now where we feel pretty comfortable that we're operating not obviously at as high efficiency as we were pre-COVID, but we're way better than we were a year ago. So it's just taught us to adapt, and I don't think this is going away. So we need to make sure that we can operate as a business and be profitable in this new system. So that's been a big learning curve for us.
And Linda, everything you're doing is online, and probably a lot of it will stay that way.
I would think a lot of it is going to stay online. You know, we've managed to put 8 weeks of the Aboriginal social worker training online, you know, in different formats and different connections, Zoom or, so I think, as Mike indicated, adapting to the new world order. I think everything's a little bit slower sometimes, getting a response or a decision made during these COVID times. But I think the one thing for me is that it can be done. You can work at home. Mind you, you got to put in those provisions in place to make contacts with people for sure. Yeah, so there's challenges, but there's also opportunities. Thank you.
Yeah, and just one final comment and then I'll stop talking. But the Chamber, of course, is all about connecting people with others, business to business, all that sort of thing, which in the past happened with a series of in-person events. Yes, they will be back and we will be doing that again. But in the meantime, we have found out that doing a virtual Zoom gathering or mingle or whatever you want to call it, when you go into the breakout rooms, chances are you're going to be in that breakout room with people that you don't know. Whereas in person, you tend to go have a drink with the same people all the time, people that you gravitate toward, people you know. So we're going to be hybrid going forward. And I think a lot of people will find that this is the ability to connect on a different level and will stay in play. But I'll leave it at that. Ian.
Yeah, no. Yeah, thanks, Bruce. And just a plug for those chamber events, those virtual events. I've gone to those events and I've kind of wondered, how will it be? How will you work it? Those breakout groups that you've done have been amazing. And I've met people that I've not met before. And you're right, I would probably seek out at a face-to-face. So thank you for that. So it's time for us to wrap up. I just want to thank Corey, Mike, Catherine, and Linda for your time, and Bruce, thank you for co-hosting. It's a pleasure, and thank you for all the really good work that you and the chamber do to advocate for not just Indigenous businesses but businesses overall. As we wrap up, we do have one more meet and greet, Indigenous meet and greet, coming up on May the 28th. Our Chief Administrative Officer, Judith Ethier, along with Emily de Rosenroll from SIP, will be co-hosting, and that's on May 28th. We're going to meet Jared Taylor from Indigenous, Tom Wesley from Salish Seaslide RV Park, and Rob Menzies from Salish Seas Industrial. So again, thanks to everyone for joining us, and have a great weekend. One more word from Bruce.
Don't forget that the Chamber Business Awards tomorrow night, 6 o'clock on Czech Television, Facebook Live, YouTube Live, and the Chamber web. Did I say Chamber website? Anyway, it's on Czech TV at 6 tomorrow night. Enjoy.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks, everyone.